This time I thought I'd landscape the incline going towards the upper freight yard. And here's the before and here's the after. Let me show you how I did it. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie, and first things first, Happy New Year into 2025, all ready to go for another year's railway modelling. Fingers crossed. Right, so what's this video all about? Well, rather than carrying on with the branch line station, because I'm waiting for a few bits to be made, the canopy sections and the station, I'm going to switch my focus over towards the main station. Now, to develop the main station, it makes perfect sense to start at the back and work our way forward. There's no point in doing the front bits just to lean across and dump your belly on the stuff and ruin the work you've already done. So starting from the back and work forwards. And what's at the back? Well, there is the incline that goes up towards the raised freight yard at the back. So what do we need to do with that? Well, clearly I've constructed it from Woodland Scenic's polystyrene incline, so I need to sort of somehow cover all that in, plus of course add some vegetation, the bushes, you know, the environment, the landscape in which it sits. So once we've looked into that, we then need to obviously fence it off, because naturally you'd have a fence behind the main railway tracks to stop folks from the countryside or cattle or whatever coming onto the railway lines, but also fence to stop people working, the permanent way workers, falling from that line down into the sort of branch line station, the main station area. So we've got to think about these little variables that we've got to build in. Now, the actual bed of this area is made from 1.5mm plastic card sheets, which I cut out and then used copy decks to glue into place. And once they were all in place, then I then decided to cork it, lay the track and everything else. Now, a few days ago, I thought about this video and what I would need to do, so I painted that white plastic card brown using one of these children's paints from Hobbycraft, and they're only £1 a bottle. Lovely job. So once that was painted in and allowed to dry, I then thought about the next day of doing the ballasting. Now, I must confess, I like to use Woodland Scenic's fine ballast. People think it's N gauge, and it really isn't. It's a decent 00 scale. Anyway, fine ballast, grey blend, so it's not all the same colour. So when you weather it down, it has some sort of colour to it. Anyway, and I've got one of these little super duper dispensers, and all I've got to do is about 4 foot, and it's now Sunday afternoon, because when I shoot this video next week I will want this to have dried. Right, pop it into place. So I've got about 4 or 5 feet to do. Open the little vent. So in next to no time the ballast is down, but that's the easy part of it all, isn't it? Now, taking care not to get any water on the back seam, I need to put some water on the ballast, not too much, and then with our old friend of 50-50 mix of water and PVA, just ordinary cheap PVA. With a couple of dashes of washing up liquid, or as they say in the States, dish soap, I believe. And I'm doing about sort of 18 inches at a time. Now, there's a lesson to be learned here. Don't do your ballasting at the end of the day when you're tired, because I must confess the ballasting on this isn't wonderful. It's not the end of the world, because I can always pick off the grains of ballast from the sleeper tops and that sort of thing. And besides that, there's going to be a great deal of vegetation in and around the lines itself, because it is a line that's rarely used, so it's not like a main intercity line, so it's not going to get the same care. So we will build in a form of neglect into it, as it were. So let's go over there and let me show you what's to be done. Now here is the ballasted area, and you can probably see that it's not such a wonderful piece of work really. Anyway, now if we look more closely into this fenced area, hopefully you can see what I'm up to. Now I need to glue the fence in this area, so I'm working from the back to the front. The front I'll do, once the back's complete, obviously. But I need to glue this in place, but also be able to install kind of, foliage and the like behind it. But because I've painted it brown, not exactly a field colour, so I'm thinking whether I need to put in some dressing on top of the brown now. Now I normally use Woodland Scenics blended turf, both earth blend and green blend. Now you might say, why don't I use static grass? Well, I'm not against static grass, but using a scale ruler, it works out that from the back of this board to the eye, it works out about 200 feet. Now, clearly you can't see grass that's 200 feet away, so you just get a sort of a blended look. I don't mind static grass when it's towards the front of the layout, but when it's right in the distance, you're not going to be able to see it. So to put in individual pieces of static grass, I don't think you're conveying a truthful message. So I kind of work, if it's, in the first 6 inches to a foot, yes, I'm prepared to use static grass, but stuff that's in the distance, 200 feet, which is, nearly 70 yards away, it doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I'm not going to put static grass along the back, but I would do, close in front. So do I glue that in first, or do I put the blended turf in first? Well, it all depends how this fence is going to glue in. So I think the best thing to do is just crack on and have a little look. Well, the first trial is complete. Now what I've done is I've used Rocket Rapid fast setting medium viscosity cyano glue and a super glue activator. Now what I've done with this little piece of fencing that you can see there, as I'll do with the next piece, is I've put a drop of super glue on the bottom sections and then held it in place and then sprayed on some of the activator and then reapplied some of the super glue as it's in place. Now I'll try and do this piece and hopefully you can see exactly what I'm up to. It's worth mentioning that to have some super glue dissolver nearby should this all go wrong and you end up sticking your fingers together, which I must confess I have done in the past. So all I'm doing is putting a dollop of this glue on the bottom of each of the posts. Clearly these fences have been used before on previous endeavours, let's say. And then, sorry if I'm masking it from the camera at all. Stick it in place and then hold it down for a few seconds and hopefully the super glue will start to bind, or not, as the case may be. Right, it's not. So all I'm going to do is come in here, put a dollop of super glue at the bottom of the first one, well actually and the second one. Okay, hold them in place there. I'm sorry if I'm masking this. And then with the super glue activator, whoops, and that should get the super glue to go off much quicker, he said, hopefully. Yes, it's starting to go. Right, so now up the other end, I shall put a drop of super glue underneath these posts here. Again, push them down into place, in with the activator, and trying to make sure that they remain upright. And there we are. Not the not the most wonderful job in the world, but hey, it seems to work. Well, those first two sections seem to have gone okay, but it's worth mentioning the use of a mirror to look back up the fence to see if it's actually reasonably straight, or acceptably straight is probably a better term for it. Because obviously in the fullness of time, when my trains come up here, you don't want this wonky fence all over the place. So I'm kind of happy with where it is. It's a little bit, what do you say, it's not quite vertical in every section, but then nor would the fence be in reality. So what I'm going to do next is paint in some PVA, trying my utmost to avoid the back scene, and then sprinkle in some of the Woodland Scenics blended turf. I think it's a case of putting on too much and then vacuuming off the excess. I just hope I haven't got too much glue on the fences, because obviously the fence then will cling on to the glue on the fence. Well, the fence is in now and it seems reasonably sturdy. I've run a vacuum cleaner along the back and hoovered off the excess ground cover, so that's good to go. So now really it's a case, oh sorry, there were a few gaps and I've put a dob of PVA in there with another little sprinkling. But now it's a case now of putting in some bushes that go behind the fence for two things really, to give us a blend into the back scene and also to mask the shadow of the fence now on the back scene, and it'll sort of tie it all together, hopefully. So what are we going to use? Well, there is no UK really answer to this, but Woodland Scenic seems to be almost the one-stop shop, sorry. Anyway, you get the idea. So I've got green bushes, black bushes, clump foliage, foliage clusters, lichen and the like. There's a couple of, I've got a bit from Jarvis, but it's very rare I come across this on my travels. And what am I going to use to put it in? Well, it's my good old friend, the Bosch hot glue gun. And it is the sort of the best thing really. You don't want to be in there with PVA trying to stick these things down. I find it easier to go in there with a hot glue gun, put a dab of hot glue in there and then shove the item on the top. It's got to be capable of being vacuum cleaned, let's say, because when you want to run a vacuum cleaner over it to get the dust off, you don't want it all being sucked up into your Hoover, as it were. So that's the kind of amount of gluing that you need to do just to allow you to carry out your monthly maintenance. So with the hot glue gun then we'll close in there and we'll stick a few bits in and see how it sort of sits. Oh, and the other thing is to add a little bit of colour. I've got some purple and some yellow for sort of flowers and buddleia, that kind of feel, so we can add those in a little later and glue those into place. Now I'm starting with clump foliage from Woodland Scenics, and it's FC184 dark green. As usual with these hot glue guns, they're called hot glue guns for a reason. They're hot and it burns. And there's little doubt in my mind that I am going to burn my fingers today at some stage, as I usually do. I instantly start by getting some hot glue on the edge of this fence. Not such a problem. We just put some of that. Right. So now it's like a case. It's just a case really of working your way along. And let's try it this way. So I'll put some hot glue in there and then poke this clump on top like so. And then hopefully when it comes to clearing up every now and again, then it won't get suckered up by the vacuum cleaner. Lovely. Now, of course, we need to break up the colours. And does that give the right kind of impression that I'm after? I'm getting stringy sort of bits coming off the hot glue gun, I'm afraid. I have to watch out for those. But I think that looks okay behind the fence. Right, now we'll throw a bit of lichen in that direction. So what you're trying to do is sort of, obviously, some British sort of foliage, but it's, you know, it's changing it. It's giving it a bit of variety in there. And then once we're done, we can always come along then and sort of clean it off. What I can't really do is put sort of large trees here, because you wouldn't necessarily have trees this close to the railway line. So we can have some taller stuff, but not necessarily, you know, your 70-foot oak and beech trees. So it's just a case of working my way along, and I shall see you at the other end. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Now, as you can see, I'm just trying to break it up a little bit, and now we start to add a few flowers. So if I put another clump of lichen in the back, this time without burning and without swearing, I do apologise, but I'm using Pico Scenic layering spray, and all I do with this is I mask off the back scene, spray the bush, and then with some sort of coloured flowers, as it were, is give it a sprinkling. So what we're trying to do here, I suppose, is a buddlier feel, isn't it, with this kind of purple. And that's how we sort of break it up down the line. Well, we're pretty much done. So finally, what we do need to do to lock it all in is to spray it with some scenic cement, because not every single sort of piece of it is actually attached. So what I thought of trying to do is get some paper behind this scenery and lock it in, and therefore when the vacuum cleaner comes to play, we shouldn't have any runaways. So what does it look like? Well, actually, it doesn't look too bad. I've tried to use a few colours in there to break up the patterns, but I don't think it looks too bad. I find that the limiting factor in doing this sort of thing lies with me, because the limiting factor is my imagination. I'm clearly no gardener. I can stick pieces of plastic together, but well, not much else really. But anyway, using the various items from Woodland Scenics, it doesn't look too bad. Of course, now we need to move on to the next section where we work on the slope coming down to the Parkway Station. And just for good measure, I popped a tree at the far end by the signal box. So there we are. Not too bad, is it? Oh, and the wound from the hot glue gun, it hurt like hell. Now, with the first phase finished, what's next? Well, I now need to build up the landscape against this rising wall here. And as far as this video is concerned, I'm going to finish at the end of this siding here, which is the siding that goes to platform 3. So I now need something to fill in this gap. Now, what I've acquired is a piece of this sort of hard foam. It was a kind of an offcut that was thrown. So what I'm thinking of doing is, whilst this is the straight piece here before that curves around, is to cut this to fit into this gap, sort of angle it down, nurture it so it fits, and then obviously here I need to build up a little bit more. Now it occurs to me that if I bang this, I should get an indent from the track underneath. It'll help me know where to cut it. Yes, that worked quite surprisingly. Okay. That's a good start. Well, it's now the following morning, and as you can see, between yesterday evening and this morning, I've made a hell of a mess. The problem was from this yellow board, because it was going quite well with the old Woodland Scenics foam cutter until this packed up. This is clearly, what should we say, not as industrial as I'd hoped. The transformer still works, but this has given up a ghost. Anyway, if you know of a better, more industrial type of foam cutter, then please let me know. I think this one costs about £15, but it's clearly not up to the task of, what should we say, more industrial type cutting. Bits of polystyrene is probably no problem. So what am I up to now? Well, I've started on the embankment, and what I've done is used some of the offcuts of this foam board onto the board itself, and then I've trimmed up just some ordinary polystyrene, thin polystyrene sheets to go along, and I'll glue these all down. And I'm going to glue them down with something used to have a far more rude name called Sticks-like, and it's very sticky, let's say, ideal for ruining your top. So I'm going to glue those into place, and after that, oh, what I remember, right, before the fences are in, is a good time now to get the track rubber on top of that track, because when I ballast it, obviously the top of the track will end up covered in glue. So before you get all the fences in, it's give your track a good clean whilst you've got easier access, right? Anyway, with Sticks-like, I'm going to use the yellow stuff underneath to support the polystyrene, and then glue the polystyrene down as well. And then after that, my intention is to put a shell on it with plaster cloth, which will go straight over quite easily. And then I've got a new product. I'm moving away from using sculpt mold, so I'm going to use a new product and give that a little go as just a test. I've got a major project coming up with this new type of filler product, which we'll tackle in the future. Anyway, so in the meantime, I shall glue this lot down and then hit it with the plaster cloth. God, and it's only 10:30. All I'm trying to do is really give it a little bit of support. So it doesn't flex too much. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess. Right, we'll just give that time to dry and clean up. Now, worth a mention, I fitted the fencing on the inboard side, must have been a sailor, on the inboard side, so that's in and it's held in with the polystyrene underneath, and I've also cut and placed in pieces of plaster cloth. Now, I've used plaster cloth C1203 from Woodland Scenics, and the only reason I'm using this is I've got some left over. There are far cheaper alternatives. This is half the price and it comes from Hobbycraft, so you need to shop around. Please don't think just because you spend more money you get a better product. That's not true. Now, this is a messy old job, so as Margaret's at work, I've been scrummaging around and I found some dishcloths, as it were, floor cloths, whatever there might be, to put over the track to stop me getting plaster on there. And then we can then proceed with the plaster cloth. Right, that's exciting, isn't it? Right, so I've got a small dish of warm water and they're cut to size. I'm not overlapping them. There's no real need for this big overlaps. There's no real strength required in this. It's not a sort of a busy hillside kind of thing. It's just a case of put this on, then put the filler on, then paint it, and then vegetate it. It's not the right word, is it? And then landscape it. That was the word. Right, so let's get stuck into this and see how we get on. Now, when you wet it and put it on, it does need smoothing with your fingertips to get it to sort of bond to the surface underneath. And believe it or not, there's a good side and a bad side, and you should do it with a plaster side up. Yeah, good luck with that if you can tell the difference, because I certainly can't. So we'll peel that one back and then pop it in the water, and you don't want to leave it in the water for too long, and then you'll soon realise how awkward this is to do, because no doubt when I take it out it'll all sort of snag up, or not, who knows. It has a tendency to sort of crease, as hopefully you can see. And if you've got any joins in your board or your polystyrene or whatever, just make sure that your joins in your plaster cloth don't coincide. You wouldn't want them to sort of overlap like that. And then if you just rub it with your fingers, you'll see the plaster cloth sort of smooth out, and the plaster pattern tends to disappear. Hopefully my track's still clean. Okay, that was reasonably successful. Piece number 2. It's not exactly rocket science, it's just a case of taking your time and ease it into place. Try not to get the muck on the fence that I've just installed. And then finally, just working my way back up, now it's finished, and just giving it a rub to take out the remaining marks. And to give you an indication on time, it's now 12:30. I'll let you know when it's dry enough to work. Well, it's now just gone 2:30, and it's dry to the touch, but it does feel cold, so there's obviously some moisture still in it. Right, I mentioned a new product, Mifo Shape, made by Scape Supplies. Now, I spoke to the manufacturer this morning, asked how do you mix it, how does it work, and all the rest of it, because I'd like to, hear about it rather than, read a manual kind of thing. And he said it works in a similar way as Sculptamold, in as much as you mix it up to the consistency of cottage cheese and then sort of trowel it on, as it were. Lovely. But its main use is for sort of rock surfaces and that sort of stuff, making up, so you have sort of three-dimensional uses for this. Not that I'm going to use it, I'm just going to slap it on as a coating, but I just want to see how it mixes up before the sort of the real day of the race when we make something sort of constructive with it. Right, so you mix it up to the same as cottage cheese. Lovely job. Now you mix it by adding water to the powder, not the other way around. So I shall open this up, and courtesy of the mug that Rails gave me as a bit of a Christmas gift, thank you very much, Rails, and it's an enamel one, quite lovely really. So stand by to make a mess. Not too sure why I'm using a mug. It's because Sculptamold, I used to measure it in cupfuls. Anyway, let's oink some in. There's a scoop included, as he finds it later on. Right, what have we got there? That's probably about a cupful. Now this is unlike the Sculptamold, this has got a resealable packet, which is kind of nice. And the Sculptamold, you have to have one of those twist wires. Right, let's get that out of the way. Yeah, it's just a powder. It's got a sort of a bit of fibre to it. Right, so what I need to do now is add some water and then stir it up with the cutlery. Wife's at work. Right, anyway, let's just see how we get on with this. I don't want to put too much water in at first, but to the consistency of cottage cheese. Of course, that's on the understanding that you use cottage cheese, I suppose, isn't it, really? And we're kind of getting there already. It's hard to know how much to pour in. And if it takes 2 or 3 mixes, then so be it. I don't really want to waste it, but it's a bit of a trial and error kind of thing, because I've never used it before. Right, that seems okay. If you can see the sort of clinginess of it. Right, let's whap some on and see how we get on. I'm only trying to put on a thin coating. I'm sorry if the camera's the wrong way around for you. I'll try to use my left hand and see how we get on. Yeah, this is no problem. All straightforward. Well, it actually took 2 of those mixes to cover it, and it looks okay. It doesn't dry as quickly as Sculptamold. It seems to take sort of twice as long, really, which means it remains workable for a longer time, which can be quite useful really. Anyway, I shall leave that now for about 20 minutes and then come back and see how fast it dries and how malleable it remains. Well, it's now just gone 4 o'clock, and as you can see, it's of a grey tinge to it. But I'm pleased to say that it remained workable for sort of almost twice as long as sculptor mould, which I see as a clear advantage, because with sculptor mould suddenly it's all too late and you're flummoxed really if you want to sort of do something else with it. But with this one, it's just a case of planning ahead, and it's worked out very well. Now, speaking to the manufacturer whether I should do any more today, and he'd sort of advise and let it dry overnight, so I shall come back first thing tomorrow morning and then paint it up, and then we'll start thinking about the landscape materials once the old cheap kiddies poster paints have dried. Now, as usual, it's the following morning. This stuff has had about 16 hours to dry out. It does feel cold, so it's probably a little bit damp, but it is midwinter, as it were. Now, I'm about to paint it, and as usual, I use these cheapy paints. These are £1 a go in Hobbycraft, and this came from probably a car boot sale or something. It's made by, or labelled up from Tesco's. So these are the sort of cheapy paints I use to give foundation colour. And I've mixed it up in a tub. And so what I shall do is whack this on there, and then once it's had a chance to dry, we'll dress it with some vegetation. So there we have a nice rich green colour, and the purpose of it is in case the vegetation gets chipped, then you're not going to see this light grey colour underneath. What you're going to see is this dark green. That's the only purpose of it really, is a safety measure. And now whilst this is drying, I've got a question for you. As you can see here, I've just placed a Hornby, one of those Hornby early primitive platforms in to give you the idea. So this is platform 3 and this is platform 2. This will be platform 1, and these are the main through lines. Right, talking about signals. So I need a signal to control this exit, the exit from platform 2, and of course the main line. So three aspect signals. Now the problem is that over by the viaduct there is this signal here. This is a 3 aspect signal with a left hand feather. Now clearly from the station area you can't see that 3 aspect with a feather. So would you need a banner repeater for that signal? Well, if you do, where would I put it? So I would imagine it would go around about here, so you could view it leaving the station and it will give you the indication of that signal. But do we need a double banner repeater? Now here's a picture taken by a friend of mine, and as you can see there are 2 banner repeaters side by side. The diverging banner repeater being the lower one, so the diverging track must then go off to the right. So taking that a step further to Chadwick, so do we need a double banner repeater here with a lower signal on the left hand side that would indicate when you've got a green light to go to the branch line station, i.e. taking the left hand feather? Now I appeal to drivers, guards, S&D, permanent way staff, anyone involved with the layout who've got a good with a railway, who've got a good knowledge of this. Perhaps you know of a double banner repeater signal, and you could send me a couple of pictures or give me some help. It would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Well, our green base coat is all now nice and dry, so it's time to think about putting on some ground cover. What I'm going to do is paint the whole thing in PVA. This is the cheap PVA from B&Q, and a mix of the green and the earth blended turfs into a little container, and all I shall do is sprinkle these on, and then when it dries, hoover it off. Now I always use it neat. I don't thin this down. I want this ground cover to stick, and I want it to be vacuum cleaner proof, as it were, so I don't thin this down. I just use it straight out of the bottle. It's not as if this is an expensive commodity, is it? So there we are with the PVA in place, and now we're just in a case really of having a mad sprinkle, really. And we're obviously going to put on too much and then vacuum off the excess and then catch it with a stocking over the vacuum cleaner to enable us to reuse it. And then just to show you the quantity involved, so it is worth recovering it, hopefully you can see that it's too much to waste really. Well, I do hope you enjoyed the video and using all those various commodities. I certainly did, and hopefully I've achieved a reasonable result. Now next time we're looking back towards the station, but this time we're building the platforms. Exciting stuff. Anyway, in the meantime, if you're not a subscriber, there's the old button, there's the Patreon button, and a video here and here, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot, take care. Bye-bye.